Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Thai Talk with Dan. Today, we have an epically detailed and long story that I'm going to have to split into 3 or 4 parts. But it goes to show what it's like when guys come here to Thailand and get involved with the working girls and try to date them and make them a girlfriend and try and enjoy their holidays with them. What goes on? Let's find out. Now, bear in mind, this guy is starting from his past. I'm not sure if it's going to lead up to today. The future, I've not read it yet. It's an epically long story. But so far, it has me very interested, especially for part 2. So stick the kettle on, grab a beer, and let's find out what this subscriber has been up to with these working girls. Chapter 1. Looking for love in Thailand. Now, the first time I went to Thailand, it was almost by accident. My real holiday destination was Japan. I was a poor 25-year-old UK final year PhD student at the time, so I had booked the cheapest flights to Japan that I could find. These flights were with Taiwan-based China Airlines. On my way to Japan, my plane touched down in Bangkok to refuel. I'd heard about the famous Thai nightlife, so whilst in Japan, I went to a China Airways office and inquired about a stopover in Thailand on my return journey. Tickets were more flexible in those days. It only cost me £50 to change my tickets to allow for a 10-day stopover in Thailand. Now, the trip to Japan was for 30 days in September 1990. I'd also spent 30 days there the previous September. I had Japanese friends who had been exchange students in the UK. The first time was much better than the second because my Japanese friends were still students in Japan and had time to show me around. The second time, my Japanese friends had all become salarymen and salary women and had much less time for me. One of my friends lent me his college girlfriend, Emmy, to take care of me. If it hadn't been for her, my second time in Japan would have been far less fun. When I was leaving Japan, it was Emmy who went with me to the airport. She asked if I would be chasing the girls whilst I was in Thailand. I lied and said I wasn't sure and kissed her goodbye. Now, I landed in Bangkok about 9 o'clock in the evening. I knew next to nothing about the city and had nowhere to stay. I changed all my money in Don Muang at a poor exchange rate. First rookie mistake. I had about £200 to last me for 10 days. At the time, this was just under 10,000 baht. I found another backpacker in the airport and asked him how to get to the city and where I could stay cheaply. I followed him on a bus and ended up sharing a room that looked like a storeroom in Khao San for 40 baht for the night. It was late. I'd yet to get my bearings and I just wanted to get some sleep. So the next day, I explored on foot with the main aim of finding a nice guest house to stay in. At the one I ended up staying in, the rather attractive female receptionist who showed me to the room laid down on the bed to demonstrate how comfy it was. At the time, I was surprised and far too shy to try and take advantage of the situation. Now, in the lobby of the guest house, I got talking to two young Irish lads. They told me that night they were going to one of the red light districts, Pat Pong, strictly just to see what it was like. And they asked me if I wanted to join them. I said I did. However, that evening it was raining heavily and they changed their minds about going to Pat Pong. I wasn't brave enough to go to Pat Pong by myself, and we ended up drinking in a Khao San bar watching a large screen TV. So boring. I could have watched TV in a bar back in the UK. Now, the following morning, I went to a Tourism Authority of Thailand office to look for ideas of places to explore. Whilst there, I talked to an older English guy who understood what I really wanted. He advised me to get out of Bangkok and get on a bus to Pattaya. I'd never heard of Pattaya before, but I took his advice and was soon on my way. I ended up in the reception of a hotel called Palm Villa. I foolishly checked in without even looking at the room. When I got to my room, it was okay, apart from one major problem. The ceiling was thick with mosquitoes. I went back to the reception to complain. The receptionist said they had no more rooms, but I could change the next day, so I accepted this. Now, whilst eating my evening meal alone at a restaurant later that day, the young waiter asked if I wanted to meet his sister. That evening, I said, okay. When we met up, the three of us drank a little and ate noodles. Somehow the two of them ended up back in my hotel room and we chatted for a while. There wasn't much mutual attraction between me and the sister, and I ended up sleeping alone again. So I slept soundly that night due to the alcohol, but the next day when I woke up, the bed was covered in blood. My blood. I had been eaten alive by the thousands of mosquitoes. Pretty much every square inch of my body had been bitten. Unlike the Thais who only show a pinprick of blood when they get bitten, every bite I received swells up and itches like crazy. When I went to the reception to change rooms, the same receptionist as before looked embarrassed at my state. So that afternoon, I went walking around a department store. 3 Thai female staff who saw I was covered in mosquito bites asked me to sit down whilst the 3 of them rubbed tiger balm all over my body, only in Pattaya. So, 3 nights in Thailand and I still hadn't done what I wanted to do, which was have aerobics with a pretty Thai woman. I determined I had to hit the bars that night. Needing Dutch courage, I downed a bottle of wine in the hotel before setting off. I didn't get far down the soi opposite the hotel before I was dragged into a bar. I sat all evening talking and drinking with the girl who dragged me in. After a few hours, I was very drunk and went up to the prettiest girl in the bar and said, "Hey, I'll give you 2,000 baht if you stay with me tonight." I had no idea of the real going rate. Now, it was not a nice thing to do to make the girl I had been talking to all night lose face like that. The girl I asked to come back with me agreed. I expect she couldn't believe her luck. The night back in the hotel was not great, to say the least. I barely remember it, except that I threw up in the toilet a lot, and the aerobics was not great due to my drunken state. The next morning, I gave the girl the promised 2,000 baht and asked her how much it should have been. She told me 500 baht. So I did not touch alcohol again for the remainder of the holiday. There was no need. Now the girl left and I felt terribly hungover. Before midday, I checked out of the hotel and started walking with my backpack along Soi 2 in the direction of the bus station. I had the vague notion I would go to the bus station and catch a bus somewhere. I didn't get that far. Some girls asked me to sit down in their bar. They asked me where I was heading, and I told them to the bus station. They persuaded me this was a bad idea, and one of them said she knew a nice hotel nearby and she'd take me there. I liked the room, so I checked in. Now the bar girl followed me to my room, stripped naked, and got into my bed. It's a testament to how worn out I was that I got into the bed beside her and immediately fell asleep. When I woke up a few hours later, I felt much recovered and nature did take its course. Now this girl was young and had a fantastic body, but she did not have a pretty face. I spent that day and the following with her. In retrospect, I should have spent the remainder of my holiday with her because she was a nice girl and happy to spend all her time with me, but I am super shallow. Despite being told frequently that I am no Elvis Presley, Tom Cruise, depending on the age of the person doing the telling, I've always only been interested in pretty girls. So after the 2 days with the new girl, I went back to the much prettier first bar girl. Her name was Pranom, and she was from Sukhothai. She seemed happy to see me, and I spent the 4 nights I had left with her. However, she would leave me in the morning, and I was bored until I met up with her in the evening. Only on my last day in Thailand did she let me spend my final afternoon in her room. The first 3 nights I paid her 500 baht per night. By the last night, I only had enough money to eat and pay for a minibus to Don Muang. So she kindly spent the night with me for free. She wrote her address in Pattaya and the phone number of her bar down for me. This was long before the advent of mobile phones. Now, I was not happy to be returning to the UK. I had only £50 in the bank, nowhere to live, and the funding for my PhD had ended. I never had been one to plan ahead. I threw myself at the mercy of the university for accommodation and signed on the dole for money. For the last 3 years, I'd been doing a PhD without any conviction because I liked being a student and I didn't want a job. My trip to Japan and Thailand had taught me a fundamental truth about the relationship between men and women. Men hope to use resources to get aerobics, and women hope to use aerobics to get resources. I was jealous of my Japanese friends who had now started work and had nice cars and apartments. I was jealous of the guys who could afford to go to Thailand and have a pretty girlfriend. For the first time, and rather late in the day, I studied hard to finish off my PhD. I started applying for many jobs too. I was so determined to get a job. I had my hair cut short for the first time since I was at primary school. I applied for 50 jobs. had 8 interviews and got 1 job offer. Of all the jobs I had applied for, the job I was offered was the worst, but it was an easy decision to accept it. I hadn't contacted Pranom since I returned to the UK because without a job, I had nothing to offer her. When I got the job, I rang her bar excitedly and told her I'd be back to see her after a few months when I had saved up some money. She sounded so happy to speak to me. I had the very naive view that I could now rescue her from the bar. So I started my new job as a computer programmer for the NHS in February 1991. By this time, I'd only half finished writing up the PhD. I told myself that I'd work on it every evening after I got back from the office, but I never did. In truth, now I had a job, I really didn't care about finishing it off. I exchanged a few letters with Pranom and wanted to get back to see her in Thailand as soon as possible. Once I even sent her £100. Though she had never asked for any money. I only ever sent money to a Thai woman one more time, but that was still far in the future and a hell of a lot more than £100. Now by June, I had already saved enough money to return for a 3-week trip to Thailand. On arrival, I headed straight to Pattaya by bus. I found a hotel room and then went to find Pranom in her room. She came back with me to my hotel room and I immediately gave Pranom half the money I had brought with me to show my commitment to her. Pretty dumb, really. I didn't pay any bar fines or nightly fee after that. However, I had expected that she would contribute to some of our daily expenses. It didn't work out like that. One time I asked her to pay for half of a restaurant bill and clearly annoyed, she refused. Now we spent most of our 3 weeks together in Pattaya, usually just the 2 of us, but sometimes her bar girl cousin hung out with us. We also had what turned out to be a very brief trip to Koh Samui via plane from Bangkok. So I booked a basic beach hut to stay in. Pranom was not all impressed by the accommodation or the lack of things to do in the area that we were staying in. I was quite happy to do nothing but laze around in a hammock all day on the beach, but she was not. In the afternoon, a beautiful, slim, young Thai girl came from nowhere to sit next to me on the hammock. Pranom tried her best to ignore the other girl. I even have a photograph of the 2 of them together. No comparison. This girl made Pranom look like a water buffalo. I must have still been in love with Pranom at the time, because I didn't try to talk to the other girl. Now, due to Pranom's constant complaining about our beach hut, we left Samui to return to Pattaya the next day. At Samui Airport, a staff member who remembered us arriving only the day before asked me why we were leaving so soon after arrival. When I told him, he said in all sincerity that I needed a new girlfriend. Now I did enjoy the 3 weeks, but maybe not as much as I expected. I could already sense that the relationship would not last. Nevertheless, I still considered Pranom as my girlfriend, and on return to the UK, I saved hard for another trip to Thailand to see her. This was to be for the whole of December 1991. When December was getting close, Pranom asked me to change the dates of my trip, stating she needed to go back to her village in Sukhothai in December. I was immediately suspicious and kept my flight dates. This time, the red carpet was rolled out and Pranom came with her cousin to meet me at Don Muang. Once we got to my hotel in Pattaya, Pranom asked me how much money I was going to give her. I no longer trusted her and was not about to give her hundreds of pounds up front again. Instead, I told her that I had brought a lot of money with me and she could have whatever money remained when I left Thailand. She was clearly not happy with this answer. Now, we spent almost 2 weeks together, but towards the end of this time, Pranom was no longer nice to me. I'm not stupid. I knew that soon some other guy would be coming to stay with her. Eventually, she left me. She said I didn't have my own home or a car, so I couldn't take care of her. She also said mockingly as she left, "Thanks for everything." So that was that, and I wasn't upset at all. Now, I did see her with the other guy when I went to her bar to take some things she'd forgotten in my hotel room. He was another Brit. On subsequent trips to Pattaya, I sometimes met and talked to Pranom's cousin. She said Pranom had married the other guy, who was a British Airways pilot. They were now living together in Staines. The cousin also told me Pranom had ballooned in weight since going to the UK. Apparently, I'd had a chance with Pranom until I'd angered her by asking her to pay half the restaurant bill. It's fortunate I never married her and took her to the UK. We would have soon grown to hate each other. Now single once more, I soon found another bar girl to spend some time with, but now I understood the game better. I was unlikely to ever trust a bar girl again. The vast majority of the girls in Pattaya are not even attractive, physically or mentally. They are looked down on by ordinary Thais as the lowest of the low as far as the Thai women are concerned. They are also not my style at all, as I am quiet and into healthy living rather than bar culture. Now, with half my holiday over, I decided to leave Pattaya and try my luck in Chiang Mai, where I'd heard the girls were beautiful. I travelled overnight by Nakhon Chai Air luxury coach from Pattaya. I was fascinated by the landscape we passed through. I saw lots of venues, prettily lit up with fairy lights. I knew that these were all entertainment places, even though I'd never been there before. When we emerged through the mountains and early morning mist into Chiang Mai, I felt like I was coming home. So I went by tuk-tuk from Chiang Mai's arcade bus station to a guest house to the driver's choosing. I hadn't slept much on the coach, so I slept that morning in my room. When I emerged in the afternoon, the resident guide soon had me signed up for a 3-day trip to the Golden Triangle, leaving early next morning. Big mistake on my part. I then set off to explore Chiang Mai, and whilst walking down Taipei Road, I sat down to talk with some tuk-tuk drivers. One of them was called Noi, and he spoke really good English. He asked me what I was looking for. There were some female college students walking past on the other side of the road, so I half jokingly said I wanted a girl like them. And Noi said he could get me a girl like that. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but I arranged to be picked up by him that evening. He arrived at my guest house at the appointed time in his tuk-tuk. First, he took me to eat at the Riverside restaurant. Then we smoked a little broccoli on the banks of the Ping River. Then we had a drink or two in a bar. And finally, he drove me to find a girl. Now, the place Noi took me to get a girl was called Sakodern, located a couple of kilometers out of town on Chang Klan Road. Once there, we were led into a room and a bell was rung. Lots of girls entered through a door on the far side of the room and they lined up either side of that door. Their price depended on which side of the door they lined up on. Now, these girls were nothing like the bar girls of Pattaya. They were younger, prettier, and more graceful. They had whiter skin and a more Chinese appearance. They looked like typical girls from northern Thailand and were 100% my style. So I chose the girl I thought was the best looking. She wasn't even from the expensive side. I paid the money and off we went. The girl's name was Yok. She was nervous at first, so I held her hand tightly. Noi took us to a bar on Chang Klan with live entertainment, where the three of us sat at a table and drank whiskey. After a few drinks, Yok was up dancing on the table. I knew then I was in for a great night. Once back in my room alone with Yok, I thought I had died and literally gone to heaven. Now, my dream was rudely interrupted the next morning by a knock on the door. It was the guide saying it was time to set off on the Golden Triangle trek. Now, for obvious reasons, I really didn't want to do the trek anymore, but I paid my money, so I thought I might as well go. At the time, I spoke zero Thai and Yok spoke zero English. So the guide had to explain to Yok why she had to get out of my bed and leave. Now, the trek was a disaster. It was just the guide, me, and the two German girls. I had been warned that it would be cold in the mountains at night and that I would need a sleeping bag. Seeing as I was from northern England and Thailand is so hot, I didn't believe it. The first day of the trek, we walked through some jungle to a village where we spent the night. Because I didn't have a sleeping bag, the villagers gave me a couple of rather dirty blankets to sleep under. They weren't enough, and I spent the whole night shivering from the cold and coughing from the dust on the blankets. I didn't sleep 1 minute. Now, the next morning, I told the guide I no longer wanted to continue the trek. I walked back alone through the jungle the way he had come the day before. It wasn't dangerous and it was easy to follow the well-worn path. Now, I didn't run into any tigers or snakes, only a few cows and the odd local. When I got back to the road, I hitchhiked back to Pai, and from there I caught a bus to Chiang Mai. Now, after catching up on my sleep, I headed that evening back to Sakodern. No need for Noi's help this time as I knew where I was going. I paid for Yok again and we spent the evening and night together, not the daytime. However, in the morning, Yok left quite early, meaning I was bored until Sakodern opened again at 6 p.m. I went for her again the following evening. Communication between us was difficult due to the lack of common language. All I had was an English-Thai dictionary enabling me to point to words for Yok to look at. After our third night together, Yok managed to convey to me that she would be leaving Chiang Mai that day, and I could not see her again. As she left through the door, she saw how longingly I was looking at her and came back to hug and kiss me. It was a nice gesture, but it didn't make me feel any happier. Right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. This is going to be a 3 or 4 part story. There's a lot going on in this guy's life, and it shows you, even today, what it can be like when you decide to get involved with bar girls or these women that you pick out of a lineup to be with you. Normally, guys would only be with them for one night, but this guy seems to be going for gold. Very dangerous, but let's see what's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen to this guy on his adventures? Let us know down in the comments, and please tune back in for part 2 tomorrow. Take it easy, guys. Look after yourselves, and ciao for now. Bye-bye.